Hi everyone, this is an instructional video on how to replace the wire on the Vollrath Cube King mozzarella slicer. So in the wire replacement repair kit, you'll get two replacement wires. You'll get a little lever as well, which is used to help tighten the strings. You'll need, which is not included, a flathead screwdriver and a wrench or a spanner. I'll be using a pair of pliers because I didn't have a wrench. So the first thing we need to do is to set up the lever. And if you use the diagram as a reference, you'll see that the hole should be on the bottom right, and you want to go ahead and insert the screw there. But leave a bit of a gap, because that's where the wire is going to go, and it's going to be clamped down to get some grip and to use it as leverage. Now we should have all the old broken wire cleared away, and it's worth noting we'll not be touching any of these middle points along the bridge of the tool. We only loosen the two bolts on either side, so the two on the left, two on the right. We loosen them to remove the old wire, and then we will be retightening those again when we put on the new one. So if we take our replacement wire and carefully unwind it, remove any excess tape and give it a bit of a wipe, give it a nice clean, and then we'll start from the left hand side and get the wire underneath that most outer bolt, and then we're going to start wrapping it around, but you want to come up through the middle of those two outer bolts, right through the middle, and we're going to just wrap it around the top of the inner bolt, as you can see, and get it tucked underneath. So make sure those bolts are loosened enough to get the wire underneath, and then it wraps around the first pivot point like that. Give it a little tug just to get it into place, and then bend the other side just to give it some sort of anchor to lock it in, and then we're going to tighten that most outer bolt just to really lock it in place so that we can feed the wire around the rest of the machine. So in one motion, we're going to try to go around the entire slicer with this one zigzag from bottom to top, just following the path through all those pivot points until we get to the end. So I tried to do this as tight as possible, but it's obviously quite difficult by hand, so it will be quite loose, but it's not too much of a concern because we'll use the lever later on to tighten these up. But if you see, I'm just using my thumb just to really sort of stretch the string as far as I can, wrap it round, give it a good bend, and follow right back down to the next pivot point. And you just kind of follow that until you reach to the other side. Now once you've got to the far side, it's a little bit different. We just wrap it right over the top of the two outer bolts on the right hand side. And we just hold it down against the arm of the slicer and use your wrench or pair of pliers just to lock only the most outer bolt. We don't want to do both bolts because we'll be doing a lot of back and forth. Just the two outer bolts is all that's required for now. So now we're going to use the lever, and if you line it up parallel to the left hand side of the machine first, we're going to take the excess wire and tuck it underneath the screw head and then just wrap it around like so. And that'll just hold it in place, and then we'll clamp it down nice and tight with the screwdriver. And then the next step will be to release the whole wire with the outermost bolt. Just release that one, and now you're free to use it to pull the string. Now this is the tricky bit, but we need to use our hand to manually pull the tension along from the right to left. The right strings are quite loose, so I'm going to just pull them tight and pass the tension along the strings one by one from right to left. And I've got a very loose string on the left now, which I can use the lever to adjust and get it nice and tight on the left as well. Once that's in place, take the pliers or your wrench and lock that in. So just tighten that outer bolt back up again. Alright, now over to the other side, and pretty much the opposite. Set up the lever like so, and wrap the excess wire underneath the screw head. Give it a twist just to lock it in place, and then screw down the screw, make it nice and tight. And then we will release the outermost bolt on the right hand side just to free the wire so that we can actually pull the lever and thus pull the wire. And so again, grabbing the most left hand wire and then make sure it's nice and tight, and then pass the tension along one by one all the way from left to right, one by one through the strings, until I have a nice loose bit of string on the right hand side, on the very most right hand side, for which I will use the lever then to finally just pull that back into place and then lock it in with the pliers on the most outer bolt again, and that will secure it down. Now you can check the tension across all the wires and it might be absolutely fine, but in this case I'm just going to go back and do it one more time on the left, just to make sure I've got it nice and tight. You might find that one side has a lot more tension than the other, and there's a way to remedy this, but just make sure you've got good tension on one side. Obviously don't pull the strings extra tight because they will snap, so it can take a lot of pressure, but just don't overwork it. Now go through each string and just check that tension, so it should have about ½ centimeter give in it. If it's a bit too loose, you can go to the side of the machine that might have extra tension, and you can actually go to the opposite side of that and pull on the looser strings to get them tight and pass that tension, or pass the slack strings off to the other side. It takes a bit of practice to do this, but you can actually even test it like if you were just to pluck the string and listen to the vibration, almost like a guitar, and you should be able to hear the same pitch, or more or less the same pitch from each string. And as you can see, if you just look at the light shining off, they're nice and straight, and that's that. Alright, once you're happy, just lock up the rest of the bolts, those 2 inner bolts that we were leaving loose. Make sure they're all nice and tight and everything's locked in place, and then we'll go ahead and trim off the excess wire from either side. When we've trimmed that off, make sure that we dull down the sharp edges just to make sure no one gets hurt when they're washing this, and then we can reintroduce the other part of the slicer and put it between the grooves and slide the pin back in, which is the axis which it pivots on. This bit can be a bit tricky if it doesn't completely match up. Sometimes the parts in the machine, they bend out of place a bit. What we can do is figure out which side of the machine it needs to be pushed to. So if I push it from right to left, it's catching, as you can see. If I push it from left to right like this, it's smooth. It goes right between the gaps. So I need to put something in place to keep it going to the right. That can be done with elastic bands. So if I just take some elastic bands, cut them up, and then I'm going to pass it underneath the left hand joint and in between where the 2 parts of the machine meet. Wrap it round, tie it in a knot, nice and tight, and that will basically create a wedge essentially, which will push the machine constantly from left to right, and therefore the wire will never catch. And there you have it. Brand new machine, good to go.